Okay, John.
Let me just talk the legislation a minute. I listened to a talk earlier this week by Deputy District Attorney that heads a high technology regional task force. He said the problem with the legislation is it always lags the technology by about 5 years. If you try and get a bill through Sacramento, it takes an awful lot of work to get that done and a lot of time. And so legislation is not the answer. So the question is, what is the answer to where technology can go and what it can do?
That's why we're teaching a course in ethics to the UCLA engineering students, for that very reason, that technology has so far outstripped the ability of politicians to legislate that we're really setting the agenda. I mean, panels like this are probably way ahead of anything that the legislature can think of. Part of the problem is none of them are technologists. That's been historically a problem. That C.P. Snow wrote an essay on this almost 50 years ago called "The Two Cultures," where he said that the ruling body in England all comes from the humanistic culture, while the problems are coming from the scientific and technological culture, and that hasn't changed. Look in Washington, try to find an engineer and a scientist other than 3 or 4 levels down. They're not there. So yeah, I think we've got to undertake the burden of the ethics of the situation.
Well, the issues transcend technology. It doesn't matter how it's done. It's what's the definition of personal data, and what's the standard for judging whether you have control over it or not, and what's the standard for the context. For example, if I have a medical condition, I have a expectation of the right to privacy, unless it's a highly contagious, deadly disease that can wipe out the population, and somebody's going to know about it besides me. Or in the case of using Amazon, the books I buy are no big deal for me to have Amazon track that. It is a big deal if the FBI is giving those records. They may draw different conclusions than Amazon does that I don't have control over. Next thing I know, I'm in trial. So I think all those issues transcend how the information is aggregated. The concept of aggregating information goes back to the book 1984, possibly earlier. It's nothing new. I think the legislation can define what the ground rules are, regardless of technology.
Okay. Somebody else? You haven't thought of anything, or you disagree with them and you're afraid to say something, or you still agree with them? So what if we were to summarize? Okay. Throw the question out. What do you think is the largest socio-technical problem? We started with technology. We've been talking about social. So what do you see as the largest socio-technical problem you're going to face in the next 3 years? I'll just throw that one out.
Start with me this
Sure. Oh, yeah, you're the
Start at the other end of the table. I think, how do we bring society into some sort of synchronization with what's happening in technology and science? We're at such a disconnect now that getting basic knowledge to the people of what is the possibilities and what are the ethical and moral issues involved is to me the biggest problem for the next 3 years. How do you do this?
Okay. Somebody else?
I don't know if I gathered your question correctly. The biggest problem I think we face?
The socio-technical problem.
Socio-technical problem? I think we face a foodstuff contamination, undetectable contamination, that will affect our country to a greater extent than anything that's ever been done.
Okay. Good. Jack,
I was just thinking, educating the public as far as what we were talking about earlier with expectation of privacy. If I have a wild and crazy weekend and I put my photos up on my MySpace page for my friends to see, and then of course I go in for a job interview on Monday, and he looks at those pictures, I expect privacy for anything bad, but yet obviously I put it out there. At what point can we start to educate the public as far as what you're putting out is going to be used for other things, so that we can try to avert it before it gets too
Okay.
crazy?
I agree with that. What are just the social cultural rules about how we use technology? We haven't really defined it yet. We have all these new means of communication, and there aren't rules about how to communicate with those mediums. For example, in our company, we routinely give lectures to young employees about emails. Say, be careful. Sarcasm, humor, emotion often doesn't come across in an email. So if you write a really short email with the best of intentions, somebody may take it as you're being short with them, and you've got to kind of make people aware of what they're writing. Whereas, the telephone's been around so long, that was never an issue. You grow up instinctively with just a few rules, don't have to talk on the phone. But with all these new mediums available to us, it's really difficult to navigate that sometimes, and I think a lot of communication is lost because the medium's so new, and we really haven't laid down the rules of how to communicate politely or correctly with it.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, let's give our panel a hand.